Good morning. Welcome. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another recorded session for Coffee and Quality. And if you are new to Coffee and Quality, welcome. So happy to have you. If you come to Coffee and Quality before, welcome back. We hope you have another great session with us as always. My name is Mingyu Lu. I'm a senior program analyst on learning analytics and compliance team at United Way Greater Houston. Today is me do the honor to kick off the meeting. We also have the rest of the team with us on the call, our director, Jessica, our senior program analyst, Elias, and our compliance analyst, Julia. So business as usual, we will go over the ground rule together before we jump into the main session in order to make sure everyone have a great session. So first is it is a safe space to share and learn. You are encouraged to share your thoughts and questions through the chat function. And if you have a comment and question, you are also welcome to use the raise hand function in the main session. We will also have a few breakout sessions today for you to participate and learn. And also, please have an open mind and open heart. Listen for what you have learned before, what is new, and what will inform the future. And also participate by sharing your knowledge and experience. The more you share, the more you will learn. And last but not least, invitation but not obligation. So we definitely encourage you to share and learn. But if you're not comfortable sharing using your microphone, you are always welcome to share your thoughts and comments using the chat function. Our whole LAC team will keep a close check on the chat function. And also, if you don't know yet, we have a team channel for Coffee and Quality. We use this channel to share future meeting reminder. We share related resources, and we also encourage you to share your resources and question. If you want to join the team channel, please put your name and email in the chat, and one of our team member will add you to the add you to this team channel. And without further ado, I'm excited to welcome Dr. Rhonda Williams to Coffee and Quality. She is going to share how nonprofits can use focus group to gather feedback. Rhonda serves as the Director of Impact and Evaluation for the Girl Scouts of Northeast Texas in Dallas. In this role, she leads a small team working across the organization, focusing on the impact and evaluation of various strategy initiatives. Having earned a Ph.D. from the University of Florida in curriculum and instruction, with a minor in research and evaluation and methodology, she honed her study and evaluation skills while serving as a graduate school fellow at the George Washington Bush Institute. She is active in the American Evaluation Association, serving on the Evaluation 21 Presidential Planning Committee. Rhonda is also a member of the Texas Evaluation Network, serving on the membership committee. Currently, she serves as the program co-chair for the nonprofit foundation TIG. When not working or volunteering, Rhonda enjoys reading nonfiction books, watching The Simpsons, and playing city skylines. Let's give a warm welcome to Rhonda.
Let me come off mute and say good morning, everyone, and I'm going to share my screen. And thank you for reading the bio. Those are always fun when you have to hear about yourself. And so I'm going to get us into presentation mode. And I want to thank you for attending. If your week has been like my week, then it's already been a week. It's a good week, but a busy, hectic, maybe there's a full meal going on kind of week. So I want to thank you for attending, and we're going to hear a little bit more about like why I like focus groups and talk about it. But I wanted you all to know my background is in pure math, and so Most days I love numbers more than I love people, but I found a fondness of thinking about how to use this, which is qualitative in nature. And so a lot of people are like, why? You're going to hear the why and the value that I know they bring, because even though my default is really analyzing robust data and I love to be in formulas and figuring out things, there is a value around using focus groups. So you heard a little bit more about me, and I am thrilled about my new job. I started in November, so it's still all new, but I'm a director. There's a little happy face in there, and it's a small team. I have an analyst, so we're a team of two. It doesn't say in bio, but a very small team, and he is also new. So we're a new team within a new organization. You heard I went to University of Florida, Go Gators. I'm a native Floridian, becoming a Texan, and the thing that got me to the state was the summer of 2014 when I was at the Bush Institute. And that was a life-changing thing that actually changed the directory of my professional and personal life and brought me to the state. Now, my professional interest is not necessarily a good picture, and it's not a picture of me, but I am a former math teacher. My first year was in middle school, and I quickly moved to high school, and I spent time around 10 years teaching in the college or high school setting. And so that's my default math teacher, favorite subject teaching, Algebra 2. Some other professional interests. My role before this one was at the Communities Foundation of Texas, which is one of the largest foundations here in the Dallas area. And so I have an interest in philanthropy and giving. And you heard a little bit more about my volunteering. I wanted you to know I'm very involved in the community, serving as finance VP. Again, I love numbers for the Junior League of Dallas, but I also am a member of one of the giving circles here. So I've also done some grant reviewing for the United Way of Metro Dallas and very involved, one of their March Fellows with the Chinook Field Society. So very involved in the community and really just love all things people, but most days numbers. So you're going to hear a little bit more about this methodology, but that's a little bit more about me. So focus groups, what are they? This is my definition that I probably got somewhere, probably missing the words from Google and maybe Wikipedia. But focus groups are a group interview in which participants answer questions about perceptions, opinions, beliefs, attitudes towards a product, service, concept, or idea. There was a reason why I had those bolded, and I just wanted to go to that definition, is because if you are 40 plus, you may remember going to the mall and always being asked to do surveys. And a lot of times they were about American products like the new Chevy, or sometimes they were about consumer goods if you ever went and took the surveys. And so even though this methodology, I'm going to be talking about it from our sphere, which is nonprofit, you need to know that the for-profit sector values this, pays for this, and uses it. So when we see anything like a new razor or a new commercial like a Gillette razor or anything that we're seeing on TV or anything in Target, it has gone through how consumers feel about that product. No matter if the product is a big product like a car or a small product like something that you would see in Walgreens or Target. So I want you to know this methodology is very powerful. We don't think about the power because there is labor that is involved in it, and we're going to hear more about that today. Again, you think about the notes from them can be recorded and they can be virtual. And obviously you know that now, but when I began to talk about this, people had not considered that you could do focus groups virtually. And Zoom was still, when I started talking about this in 2018, Zoom was still something everybody didn't have a login for. So benefits of the focus groups, like why would you do it? Like, why would you do a focus group when you could just make a survey and use SurveyMonkey or use Qualtrics or use Google Forms? The reason you would is because they're dynamic. They are better than a survey as far as the interaction you're going to get from your participants, as far as getting their real-time thinking maybe to surface through their verbal communication and nonverbal communication. And it becomes a conversation with the moderator as well as the participants. And so when you're taking a survey, if it's on your computer or your phone, or even if it's over the phone, old school over the phone, that's you and the survey, or the listener who's taking your answers from the survey. That is very different from you being in a situation where there are others around, meaning that the other participants are of value. Just like when you're thinking about maybe your favorite coffee, since this is all about coffee as well, when you're talking about it with others, you remember that, oh, I did like that flavor. Oh, I'm going to try that coffee next time. You are sparked by the ideas of others. So that's also why you use a focus group over a survey. Here's some disadvantages. If you wanted to know how Rhonda felt about your new Gillette razor, a focus group won't do that for you. You would not know how an individual felt, and you wouldn't know an individual perspective. It's not that you couldn't code it to the individual who's stating that fact, but the way you analyze data from a focus group is much more holistic, and you're trying to surface trends and themes. And we'll talk about that later in the presentation. And so that's the reason, if you really want to know how someone feels about something because you want to know their individual perspective, you wouldn't utilize the focus groups. You're trying to get how a particular stake group holder feels, or how a particular group of employees feel or clients feel. That's a reason that you would use it. Another disadvantage is they're labor intensive. You're going to hear me take you through all the considerations to prepare, to execute, and to report out. Focus groups take a lot of time, and I think that's another reason why in the nonprofit sphere we don't use them as much, because like I said, I have a team of two, and sometimes you don't have the extra labor that help you execute on the focus groups. And you'll hear why I'm saying execute. There are many steps. The logistics required. If they're in person, there's lots of considerations. Even if they're virtual, there's lots of planning behind the scenes. And also even to build the questions for a focus group is even a little different from just building questions from a survey. You're going to hear me take you through questions. We're going to do a little breakout room around questions, but you're going to see that the focus groups are not as easy as just asking a few people to come and talk about something. Lots more planning, lots more intentionality that differs from if you're using any other data collection method that's qualitative in nature. So here's while I got into focus groups, and then I'll pause to see if there are any questions in the chat, and I know Jessica may let me know. When I was at graduate school at University of Florida, we were all studying under a professor, and for that reason, all of our dissertations on instructional coaching. So that's what it was. So we had the opportunity, and we were at the Peabody Hotel. I believe that's the name of the hotel. It's the hotel with a lot of ducks. We went to Orlando as grad students, and we were assigned rooms to do focus groups. And at that time, we were hired as a partnership with Jeb Bush's foundation, which I think is the future for Florida. And he gave awards to all the teachers of the year in their respective counties, elementary, middle, and high school teachers. And so there were hundreds of teachers there, and we had focus groups. And there were about maybe 15 of us as grad students. We drove down to Orlando from Gainesville, got paid for the day. But what was great about it is like our advisor like planned the whole thing. Like she told us we needed to bring a tape recorder. She had someone who was doing logistics in the room. So like the support person and then the facilitator. You opened up this envelope that she gave us. The questions were there with suggested times, things to say, the greeting to share, the wrap-up questions. So essentially bring yourself, bring your tape recorder, you have someone assisting you, open up this envelope and go. And I thought it was so cool. And it was really cool because the hotel we went to, again, is the hotel that has all the ducks. And if someone remembers the name of the hotel, put in the little chat. So it was really good. And then I left and went back to Gainesville. So I was like, this is so cool. I'm going to always use focus groups. So when I got my first job post PhD, it was at Region 10, which is our education service center here in Dallas. There is Region 11 in Fort Worth and Region 4 there in Houston. And when someone gave me a project that I thought was well suited, I was like, I'm going to use focus groups. And lo and behold, I had no idea of what it took. In that particular project, it was looking at principals and assistant principals and how they felt about a leadership academy that had been going on for about 15 years at that time. And they were thinking about changing it. So they wanted me to think about tapping into stakeholders from the last 3 years and go. And the leader was like, and Rhonda, if you need anything, I have a budget. So if you want to feed the people, you feed the people. So I was like, how awesome is this? I have free reigns. I have my population. I know what I'm looking at, and I got money. And I was able to order nice lunches for the educators. And so this was awesome. However, all of the work it took is the reason why I talk about focus groups today, because I had no idea of the labor of love that I was signing up for, as well as the reporting post the focus groups that I was setting myself up for. Whereas I thought it was a one and done. The thing is, when we turned all that data into our advisor, we were not part of the coding or any of that. We just were the labor to get it. I didn't realize, like, when I was planning all these jazzy things and the food and the peppermints, that there was a report that was due at the end of this. And so I'm going to show you how the set yourself up for success by thinking about things on the front end if you want to do a focus group, so that you're not looking at a lot of data that you have not planned to receive. Because in that instance, there were 4 focus groups and I had not planned to receive that data. And it took me actually about a month and a half, so 6 weeks, to even sort through it and make sense of it, while you're still toggling other projects. But that was a bear that I set myself up for. So that's why I talk about it today. And then where I have also used it is in group projects. In Region 10, we were a team of 2. And so then once I tackled the bear, maybe about a year later, we were able to do it. And so from an advisor setting it up, making it very easy at a nice hotel, talking to teachers who were teachers of the year and no real prep, to myself dragging in the deep water and wading through it because I set it up and had not thought about the outward product or the end product. I didn't have the end in mind, to then mastering a framework for this thing and really actioning it with groups and knowing how to plan for it and how to truncate it so that it's feasible and that you can wrap up your situation. Because when people entrust you to do focus groups, just like a survey, all they're really actually, the subtlety there is, and I need the report. So we do all these great things because we're talking about it at the end. So do we have any questions in the chat before I go to my next topic? Get it?
Hi, you don't have any questions. You have
No
a confirmation that it's the Peabody Hotel and some
okay, yes.
from there.
Yes, I've never stayed there. I've only been for the focus group experience, but it's a beautiful, I think, 4-star hotel. Yeah, like 4 seasons. It's beautiful. Yes, thank you. Thank you for the person in the chat.
Yeah, there's a couple of them. Yeah, and then
okay, thank you.
Yeah, you have an echo about that students who are interested in focus groups or interview. Sarah encourages them to plan to take an additional 4 hours of recruitment, cleaning, coding for each hour of the qualitative data.
Ooh, Sarah, I love that because I didn't have that formula. Yes, I would have read it down. I just got to write it down on the appropriate slide. So yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that, because I really didn't know. So we're going to come to, like, why did I call this great? I tell people that I work with, I am extra. I'm a plain Jane in my appearance and maybe the way I do things that are natural. But when it comes to my work and my reports, I always like it a little flair. So in that vein, I always think about the questions and I think about, like, how am I going to make this so I can get what I want? So even if you don't bring that flair to the questions, I still want you to know, like, this is what's going to make them great. You can ask a question, but if you ask a question, you can get great conversations. And again, we do this because if you just wanted to ask a question, you probably could have did that in the survey. So you're thinking about things that are going to help people discuss and open up, build a short-term trust with others in the room. And for that reason, we're going to talk about questions and we have a quick breakout group for you. But here's what makes them great. You see, I talked about questions. I've honed in a little bit around organization. We have a few slides that we're going to address that. Logistics, I've talked about that. I have some suggestions there. And then you as the moderator. So we'll go through these. But what is up next is questions. Again, I already talked about that flair. You're going to see some suggestions I have there about how many really are doing. But beyond that, you'll see at the bottom, you need to have a closing question or questions. You always want to do a catch-all. If there's anything else you want to share, anything I need to prepare. So most of you here know that. What people fail to realize sometimes in this work is that not only do your questions need to be prepared, they need to be vetted and approved. So whoever has entrusted you to talk to their participants, their clients, their stakeholders, you want agreement on those questions. And sometimes I do that even with my survey, like, hey, I know you said you want to survey, this is what I'm thinking. Are you good with that? And even if it's in person or email, I always want them to be approved. Because if I am bringing you a report and then you say, oh, well, we didn't get any data around that, that's because I didn't build a question. And that's because you didn't tell me I knew I needed a question to ask that. So you want to make sure they're well prepared, but vetted and approved, meaning give your stakeholder who's actioning you to do the survey, give them the cafeteria. So if I know I'm trying to nail down to 7 or 10, I'm going to develop 12 to 15 questions so that they could have some editing rights. And I allow them to manipulate the questions as they see fit, because as long as I got the content, I'm going to be good. But that's a very important step. And again, I thought about even when you're doing something that's 30 minutes, and I thought about this because I built a scenario that you didn't really need 60 minutes for the scenario that we're going to see. But even if you're doing that, you want to have 3 to 5 questions. And these are true data collection questions. These are not the demographic questions. Who are you? Where are you from? What brings you here today? Which is good. You can have those. These questions I'm honing in are what is going to surface the data you need to help this project that you're doing, you're investigating, or you're learning more about. So with that in mind, here's some of my examples. Again, a little flair. This is if it, again, depending on your age. In my family, they maybe say Oprah, but believe it or not, depending on your age, Sally Jesse Raphael was my favorite talk show host. So again, I was thinking about questions like, how did that make you feel? Can you explain? Could you describe more? Could you explain more? And again, you could ask this in a survey, but it's how you as the moderator are bringing people into the conversation. And so those are just some generic examples that I've made. You can see that I made them generic because, again, this is a learning experience. So we don't know the practice or the program we're looking, the registration process. But to put you into a real situation, we have a scenario. And so Jessica's going to bring out, do the breakout groups, and I'll try to get this information into the chat. But you're a principal of an elementary school. Again, old educator here, former educator here, and you like to obtain feedback from parents and or caregivers about the new music program. I want you in your breakout rooms to definitely just introduce yourself to each other. You might know each other, but I want you all to develop 2 or 3 questions for this group of stakeholders. The principal is going to be making some decisions about augmenting, sunsetting, or scaling this program, but wants that parent caregiver feedback. So Jessica, take it away and get them in focus groups if you can. And what I'll do is stop sharing and drop this into the chat, because if I can get it into the chat, I think they'll have it for the breakout.
Great. And I added your scenario into the chat for you, but there is a question right above that. So there's a question on, is there a suggested participant size minimum for focus groups?
Yes, thank you. And I think we were going to talk about that in the future, but it's okay. We can talk about it now. Yes, I say no more than 10. So in that vein, sometime inviting 15, knowing that you'll land between 7 and 10. I think that's manageable if you had an hour with people to get voices and to not make people feel there's pressure to speak or not. 7 to 10 makes it comfortable. I think anything above that, even if you're recording that, make sure data collection very hard, because it's not enough airtime for all of the voices. So thank you for that question.
Okay, so you have your breakout rooms all set up, and we will open up the rooms and you'll have about 4 minutes. All right, there we go. Zoom should force everybody back in here in a couple of seconds.
Okay. We'll have a few people who want to come off mute or get in the chat. All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. And this is a time where I invite a couple of us, if you'd like to come off mute, but you can also feel free to chat in the chat, drop a few of your questions. Again, your elementary principal, they want to know how the parents or the caregivers are feeling about this music program. So I want to know what some of your questions that you came up with.
Can I go, Rhonda?
Yes.
Okay. I am Shauna, and the 3 questions that we came up with all lend to positivity, because the more buy-in that you can get from parents in the community, the better. So we came up with what do you like about this new program? B, what are some improvements that you would like to see about this program, still leaning to the positive. And C, always, because in education we can use all help, will you be available to support as a booster or a volunteer for this program?
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Getting an ask at the end, and a different kind of ask, a donation still, because it's a donation of time. I love it. I love it. I love it. Anyone else? And I'm trying to see, and feel free again, if you don't want to come off mute, and again, you don't have to have your camera on. I see some in the chat. Can you describe how your family feels about music? Yes. How would this program be important to your children? That's one of those questions that just throws it out there. The value, surface the value you see, surface the value you believe this program is bringing to your student or to the students. I see another one. What made you enroll your child in the program? What do you like the most? So that's similar to Shauna's group. And did this program help your child gain more proficiency and comfort in their instrument? I love it. I love it. It's a deep question. I might do proficiency and comfort as two separate ones, but I love it. So that's like not double barrel. And then or did it help them gain confidence? So there's three things in there: proficiency, comfort, and confidence. So I love that. This person, her name is Julia, and it's probably Julia in her group. They already are thinking about, what am I reporting out on? And so they're stealing my presentation, which as a teacher, I always love, because stealing a lesson means you're already connecting the dots. They already are setting up how maybe their trends or themes. And they are making, when I see proficiency, confident, and confidence, I already see like they're trying to report out on these different things. And so that's a very targeted way of thinking about your questions. They went over and beyond. We're going to talk about how you can maybe set yourself up for success a little later in the presentation. The credit goes to Linda, is what Julie said. And then there's some other questions. How has it impacted your child's overall experience, educational experience, and what feedback have you received from your child? I like that. What are the kids saying about this music program? Because if I'm going to make a decision to sunset, scale, I want to know. So, because again, we know that resources are always limited. And so the principal is not just having a focus group to just see how it's doing. In this vein, they have a reason. We're going to grow this thing. We're gonna maybe keep the same, or we're maybe going to close it down. So you guys have gone over and beyond. I can see you guys are already in the way of thinking of how do you get to the data? How do you build questions to get to the data? Because again, we do focus groups. They're not just a gathering. Their intention is a data collection. They're a data collection mechanism. So really good. And I see, tell us any experience. So I love these. I'm going to see if Jessica, you capture those for me. I don't even know if I'll need them, but I love them all. I don't even know if I'll need them. And I'm like, you guys don't understand. With the week I've had, I was like, what's a scenario I know I could get some good questions. So the fact that I made a scenario under pressure and you guys have done it, that makes me very happy on today. So we're going to go to our next part of our presentation. Just give me a second I'm going to share my screen, but let me make sure I'm in presentation mode. And okay, we're going to continue on. So I've talked a little bit about this already, but I want to hold this down around organization. Feasible and realistic. When I had a budget and an idea, I was like, yeah, I'm just going to do a focus group every Tuesday at lunch. I'm going to do 90 minutes. We're going to order food in, all these things. I didn't understand how that was very stressful, because there were other things going on, and that even if I was going to do that, maybe I was going to book 2 in the same day, like maybe a morning and an afternoon session, or maybe book 2, like a Tuesday and a Thursday, but 1 every single Tuesday for an entire month maybe was very taxing. And again, we were a team of 2, and this was actually an individual project. So this was a one-man shop on that project. And so I want you to think about what is realistic and feasible based on the labor that you and or another team member may have. And so if I would have known how much it would have taken, I would have told her, yeah, I'm going to do 2 focus groups. Maybe I really didn't need the 4. Because I was like, I'm going to do 2 principal and 2 assistant principal. I don't know if they helped my data collection. It made me have much more data, but I don't know if it helped me answer my questions any better. And it put a lot of labor, and it was unrealistic. You also want to have your overview or expectations really thought about. And when I say that, you know how at the beginning, Mayu, and I'm mispronouncing her name because I can't see it, and so I want to apologize in advance. She gave us the slides of orienting us. So you want to think about what are your expectations, because some of that you're going to reiterate when the focus group happens, but you want to be able to send that into your invitation. I would like you to participate in a focus group around X because of Y, so that people understand why they would come and what you're surfacing. Sometimes in our scenario, parents and caretakers, to answer questions about a music program. It lets people adopt in or out. And so you want to always have that language kind of ready to go. And some tools, we know that Zoom does that. Again, some people don't use Zoom in the same way, but Zoom is a great way to do that. But also Eventbrite is free. And in that situation, I actually use Eventbrite. Eventbrite's very good that it will send reminders if you need to. And it also help you send up follow-up thank yous. That tool is as good as you use it. And there's a lot of back office function. And again, it's free. And so that was my tool of choice. It just was wonderful to reach out to people, and it also would show me which emails bounce back. It just was a good who read the email, who didn't. It was really a good tool in that way. So logistics, you've heard me talk about this. This is the reason why I made a presentation, because the preparation I realized was much more. Again, walking into that hotel and opening up an envelope with it all being done, I had no idea what it took. You already saw us talk about questions, developing them, getting them vetted and approved, thinking about how you're going to invite people, thinking about what's your realistic time, thinking about the time you're going to have in the post data collection portion to develop a report. You've got to prepare things, because if someone asks you to do focus groups this month, being May, because they want to talk about it in June at a leadership team meeting, and you know that happens to us, you have to think about like what's realistic. It's not holding the focus group, it's also what I have to do on the back end. And so prepare. You're going to hear me say that even more as we continue through this, because that's what I learned. It takes much more than just developing questions and getting people in a room or a Zoom room. You want to create a welcoming environment, and you do that to what's natural to your personality. But the reason you want to do that is you're inviting people into a space of sharing, and the more comfortable they feel, maybe the more truth they will surface, or even if they chose to speak at all. And so it's also the environment you create. This is drinks and snacks when applicable, and this is definitely the in-person options if you have the chance. There was a nice touch about not the food, because the food is only someone's budgeted that for you. But having things like water and mints when in person is very helpful, because even on the Zoom call, I have water near me. So think about if you're in person, asking the opinions of others means they're going to be talking. So think about the nice touches that you could bring, because again, that actually helps people feel welcome, and it gives them that environment. They really do want me to speak because they have some mints and water if I needed it. And always to orienting people and to allowing them to give you that name, organization, and context. I think that is always very helpful. Even if I'm doing focus group, doing virtual, I let people talk about where they're from. We didn't do it orally today, but when you all came in, you said where you're from and your organization. And I was able to see somebody's from Girl Scouts from reading that trade. So they're from Girl Scouts there in the Houston area. So also giving people that opportunity. Again, that time is not your data collection time. That's your time to help people feel comfortable, but that's very important that you do it. So you're the moderator. Keep calm. You're the integral ingredient. And that's the thing. The survey, when you do a survey, it's the words are they're the connection, the conduit of getting the information from researcher to participants. But in this, you're the conduit, you're the main ingredient. So it's how you've prepared, how you thought about it, how people feel comfortable, how good your questions are that are going to affect the output. So the onus of the focus group is on the person. And so some people's personality, this works well with. Some people would never do a focus group. But no matter what you decide, and even if you get the chance, just know a lot of things hinge on who you are and how you've prepared and how you make people feel. And that's very important, because we all know and remember that communication, 93% is nonverbal. And so even in the Zoom room, you can get a feeling from people nonverbally. It's not things that we orally can process externally, like what we're seeing and what we're feeling, but you know what makes you feel relaxed. You know, if you've ever had a healthcare situation where you're talking to a healthcare provider, like a doctor, a nurse, even a nurse's aide, you know there's something they did to put you at ease or not, especially if it was you, like if you were caring for a family member. So just like those high tense things, like a healthcare situation, that focus groups are not that serious, but the moderator's level to make people feel comfortable is, if you do it, you can get better data. The absence of it could preclude people from sharing. And I wanted to point that out. We talked a little bit about norms and making people, you just heard me hone in on that, about like, you want to make it safe, non-threatening atmosphere. And you want to get some really good facilitation skills. You have to have a willingness to redirect. And then those who are former educators will know this in particular, like if Johnny, and Johnny is a bad person, but we always talk about Johnny in education. So if Johnny's using too much airtime, you have to say, that's really great, and we've heard from you more than once. Let's open up for someone else to answer that question. You have to have a willingness to redirect, because we always have group dynamics. And sometimes we have people that like a lot of airtime, and sometimes we have people who would not speak at all. So your facilitation skills can encourage people to speak, but it also could encourage some people to speak less. And that's very important sometimes in focus group, especially questions where people feel very passionate about. And then you want to create the participant choice. If you can't tell, I talk a lot. I came out 9 months. I was not having conversations, but I was acknowledging some of my parents' friends at 9 months with 2-word sentences. And then by the time I was 2, I was talking in paragraphs. So I'm one of those people that if people ask me a question, I feel like I have to answer. So I'll say, but all of my friends are quiet. You know, all of my close friends are quiet people, and I've learned the value of what that brings. They're great observers. Sometimes I'm not, but allow people to remain quiet. If you have 7 questions, 7 to 10 questions, and you prepared and you're ready to go, allow people to have the right of refusal of maybe not answering every question. But again, if you've made them feel comfortable, they'll chime in when they feel comfortable. But not everyone has to chime in on every single question just because they're in the room. And respect that, because that also sends a signal to people of letting them be comfortable. I can speak or I cannot speak. Very important. And so any questions around the organization and logistics, because we're getting ready to go into the analysis of the post-execution part of focus groups. Do we have any questions?
We have 2 questions. One of them was the follow-up we were kind of talking about when they went into the breakout rooms, but would you cancel your focus group if you didn't meet that threshold of participants?
So that would, thank you for reminding me of that one. I would not. That's just me. And I think this is a personal preference. It's also, it's a position of, do you have the luxury of having it again? Do you have another group of stakeholders that you could tap into? Could you reschedule? But to me, I always believe in the coalition of the willing is very valuable. So if 3 people told me that they're going to talk about something, and I don't have another way to get that, or I know my time window, and I need the data for a report, I'm going to hear from the coalition of 3. Yeah, I might have wanted 7 and 10 in the room, but for me, I would. And also in that, you may even get a more robust set of data with a smaller group. But it's a matter of preference, but I wouldn't cancel. Well, that's just me. I wouldn't cancel.
Next question was from Linda, and it's, do you recommend compensating participants?
I recommend talking to who is over your budget and has given you authority for your budget. I think in a non-profit context, I think compensation, just like if you've ever gone to university and done research, compensation has to be in such a way that it's not influencing people. So things like a $5 and $10 gift certificate to places like Target, Walmart, Amazon are very helpful. I think when it approaches like a $25, that could be seen as an incentive. But I think it's your budgetary constraints and your level of comfort. But who doesn't love a $5 Starbucks gift card? Because even if you don't drink coffee, you can re-gift it to a coworker. So I don't think it's anything wrong in the gift. And that's the way I would compensate. I would compensate by something in the form of a gift card. So let me state, I'm not sure that I would pay people unless I work for like Chevrolet, or Tesla, and I wanted to know. I don't know in a nonprofit context if that's the thing that we would do. And I also don't know if it'd be above board with auditing purposes.
Yeah, there's a lot of considerations for that for sure. Thank you for the auditing purposes. I think
Yes.
it's about how do you value someone's time and what kind of
Yes.
gesture compensation can you provide to them to honor the
Yes.
time and the information they're about to share with you in a way that really like aligns with kind of some restrictions placed on nonprofits for giving incentives. Yeah.
And
Yes,
Jessica,
yes.
just one note on that, if I can. I mean, I think too, I've heard in other settings, like when you're dealing with an underserved population, you know, being considerate of what might be valuable to that person. Are you compensating them for travel to you, or maybe a virtual option is better? So I really appreciate that input, because yeah, balancing reward, like valuing with not influencing, is hard.
Yes, will be very key. Will be very key. And it's like, probably there's an ethics in that, like what we're doing, especially if it is a vulnerable population. Like, you know, $25 is meaningful to me today. It's so, as you know, like that would matter. So really good question though. Something I had never thought about. And I'm only thinking about the finance stuff because of my volunteer role in Junior League. I had never thought about audits before. And I hope after May 31, I don't think about audits again. So this is a new skill set that I've been building.
Yeah.
So,
Sarah had two more things real fast. Sarah had a
Mhm.
great note that I just want to lift up because I heard Linda mention about transportation, but I think it folds nicely into logistics of considering providing childcare and transportation support for
Yes.
participants. Like,
yes,
ooh, double down on that. But you have one more
Yes.
question. Could it be useful to allow participants to have access to the questions in advance?
yes, yes, yes. And that's something you could do in your, when you're inviting them, you know, via email, or even if you're doing something in person, you had a flyer. Yes, because that's actually going to make me feel more comfortable. You're summoning me to an experience, and you give me the questions. I already know what I want to say about question 2, or I know that I'm not going to answer question 4. It will really help people really think about it. How many of us have gone to meetings and they don't have an agenda? And even if it's not a formal agenda, they've not told you what it's about, and it's 90 minutes. And I'm always like, what do we want to talk about? Where are the bullets here? I'm more comfortable when people are like, yeah, we're going to talk about these 3 things. My brain's already ready to respond. So that is a really good question. And Jessica, thank you for acknowledging that. When you are planning for populations, especially when you're trying to get families, thinking about childcare, thinking about if there is a way to give meals and or snacks, because you are asking for people's time, especially if you're doing things in the evenings or the weekends. So that's a very good. And again, that's not so influential as making a logistics part of the decision of who you're asking questions for. So that's a very good one, whoever in the chat asked that. So now we're going to talk about analyzing. And like at the end, this is important to the stakeholders who ask you to do that. Lots of times that's our boss. It could be something that you're doing as a side project, you know, like as a volunteer, but like, what do our bosses need to hear about this focus group? Because they're not in the weeds with us. They don't really necessarily have cared that you've done things like think about the families, or that you bought $5 Starbucks cards. They're not in those weeds. They want to see what are you putting on me, what's the output. So that's what you're really thinking about in the beginning. And again, when I invited all those principals, assistant principals, I did not have my end in mind. And it set me up for mountains of things that I was not ready to receive. And so here are some things. Determine your strategy beforehand. We have a scenario where you're going to go into our last breakout room for the day, where you're going to think about your strategy beforehand. That question that I honed in on, where they had proficiency, confidence, and something else I forgot, they already had their strategy of what they wanted to know about this music program. Is it helping your kids be more proficient? Is it helping them be more confident? And again, I forgot their third domain. But think about your strategy beforehand. And that's more than just developing the questions. It's how you're going to report out. I had great questions that were approved and vetted. I didn't know how I was going to analyze and just get that data to look like something at the end. Decide if you're going to record or transcribe. You, like today, people are recording this, you know, so there are reasons to record things if you have permission. When I did that focus groups, we had tape recorders, and that was really if my advisor as researcher needed to hear something again, but you decide that. Lots of times I just record handwritten because that's where I process. And if I'm in the room with people or in a virtual context, I'm writing down summaries of what I heard. Because again, the point of focus groups is not the individual, but what is it coming out? What are the themes and trends that I'm hearing about what I'm posing? Determine how you capture the data. Again, I am handwritten and that's how I process, but I also think that it might be helpful if you have a team member, or even if you're not like me and you need handwritten, have your already data collection tool, whether you're going to put it in a Google Doc or an Excel sheet or a Word doc. Have it already set up, because that also helps you be able to have your data. And if you have a qualitative software, then you already have your data in a place where you could export it somewhere ready to use, and determine how you will summarize it. So we're about to have a scenario where I'm going to put you guys in the driver's seat, which I didn't put myself in when I was looking at the principals and assistant principals and how they felt about the Leadership Academy. But I want you to think about how you're going to summarize the data. So here's a scenario, and then Jessica's going to get us into breakout groups. A local nonprofit wants to determine if their healthy food distribution is working and meeting the needs of their clients. Their clients pick up weekly in the evenings. And so I thought about this. My church actually does this in conjunction with a food bank here, the North Food Bank of Texas, and it's fresh fruits and vegetables. And they do it every other second and fourth Wednesday. And I've not volunteered. And part of it is probably the researcher in me is like, well, I don't really know how it's going. I could still give my time as a church member, but part of me was like, I would think about like how, if I had the chance, would I figure out how it's going? Yeah, I could ask the parishioners who volunteer every second and fourth Wednesday, but if I could talk to the clients, what is it I want to know? So what I'm doing is putting you in the driver's seat of making a situation that's fictitious in nature, unless you want to come to my church and do it, St. Luke United Community Methodist in Dallas. But I want you to think of your logistics, key questions, develop 2, 3, because we're in a short time. I think we have 7 minutes for this, and think about your role. And again, that's the only frames I've given you. So I want you to think about your logistics. I hope to hear some really great strategies of how you're going to do this. So I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to get us in the focus groups, and hopefully we can get this in the chat so they'll have it. Not focus groups, get us in our rooms. And you're developing your strategy for how would you hear from the clients who are receiving this.
Great. I've got them all loaded up. I put this in the chat. And you'll have 7 minutes. I believe that variety is the spice of life. So you're going to be in a different room with different people, maybe depending on Zoom's, Harry Potter skills and sorting you in and out. So we will see you on the other side of 7 minutes. Like you have everybody back in, Rhonda.
Okay. Well, welcome back, everyone. And I already know this is an advanced group, so you probably even went beyond the ask, which is great because that means you still some of the lesson. But I wanted to hear if there's someone that wanted to, again, you could type some things in the chat, or you could come off a mute and share. I want to hear about your logistics and how you're going to get this data from clients that are picking up weekly fresh fruit and vegetables. Somebody want to tell me about it? What did you think about? What did you talk about? Yes, I think I see Allison off mute. Yes.
Our group came up with the thought that yes, we can ask the group that's coming Tuesdays to see how it's going for them, but we also need to find the group that's not coming. So we need to find the logistics to make a meeting maybe during a different time that would serve them. And ask those the questions, how can we get you there? So that would be one. So we would want 2 focus groups. That was part of the logistics of that. And one of our members brought up the fact that if we had a perfect world, we could pay for childcare and transportation, but whatever the money's available, use that. So that was our question for that.
Okay. I like it. That group thought about stakeholders. They had the ones that are utilizing, the ones that are not utilizing, 2 different groups of stakeholders. And quite frankly, you may be asking 2 separate types of questions because you're trying to figure out what would make them adopt, or what's turning them away, or is it not meeting their needs. So I like that. That we didn't even talk about that, but stakeholder differentiation, if you will. So I love that.
I don't have a super elegant Oh, go ahead.
Yes, Sarah.
I don't have a super elegant question for this. It's more of like a scenario you would pose, but I really like asking people if you've ever suggested this like program to a friend and they've said no, what were the reasons they couldn't make it work? And that's a really good way to get at like, what are the barriers without like, because it's hard to reach the people that you're already not reaching, but that's a good way to be like, what are those barriers that might be showing up that we don't even know about?
Yeah, really great. And that's a good question. That's a good question. And then it also lets me maybe tell you some of the barriers I personally feel and blame it on a friend. So it's also a great way to get that too. So I love that question. Okay, and I'm looking at some of the chat. We had some logistics thinking about before, after, pickup, childcare. I see that. We have some questions. What happens to the foods? What's being used? What's not useful? What are some key foods for your diet that might be missing? Really good. Like, is this food we're providing something your family is using and or not using? So really good. I love this about language proficiency because that in particular in my church, it was a former African-American community. Now it's primarily Hispanic and Latina. So that is like, when we're planning things, we think about translation, especially if it's community facing. So I love that. Meeting options, in person or virtual. And do they have the tools? Allison, that's good. Because there's an assumption there. If I give you sweet potatoes, you actually have and or stove and or materials to bake and or use pots, pans. That's really good. Because sometimes we have one action hadn't even thought about, is there something that people have that could utilize what we're giving? I really love that one because that's how sometimes our well-intentioned thoughts are in the nonprofit sector. We don't think about what could be a barrier of entry. Like maybe I don't come get your food because of X, and we hadn't considered that. So it was a really good question. Anything else around logistics that people thought about? Because I'm going to tell you what I thought about this when I made the scenario. I don't know if I get this group for 60 or 90 minutes. You know, this is a group that might already time may already be strapped if they are raising families and I'm getting them in the evenings. Maybe I only get this group for 30 minutes. You know, like maybe I instead of me wanting my elegant 7 to 10 questions, I'm asking them 3 to 5 things because I have them for a short window of time. So thinking about who your stakeholders are is very important and tailoring it to them. So someone said group 12 was amazing. I'm going to assume so and agree. And then someone said about culturally diverse foods. That's right. Are we distributing foods that they know how to cook and know how to be familiar with? That's right. And do any of the foods, do they have options for special diets? Vegan, vegetarian, hypertension, diabetes. So really important. And again, I can see some people probably work in this space. I only volunteer in this space. We have, our church does this and I've never volunteered there, but I've gone to food banks where we do give things. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know if white rice is like what they needed, you know? So really good questions there, And it's not that people are not happy to take it. It just might not be the best option depending on their health circumstances. So really good. And I'm going to look at this last one. 3-question survey. I love that 3-question survey. What's working well? What could you change? Any additional comments? That's right. So thinking about that, again, if you have this group for a short time. And so that one was just a scenario that I'm interested in. And I just want to know more even about my church. Maybe that's the decision of maybe why I haven't given my Wednesday evenings. So we're going to continue because we're almost to the time where we wanted to open it up for future questions and answers. And let me make sure I'm sharing my screen. Where we're now thinking about the final report, taking us home. Maybe we're leaving base 3, trying to go to home base if you play baseball or watch baseball or even kickball, same concept. We're at base 3 trying to go home. So when we think about this, and I'm trying to get to my next slide. Here it is. And this thing is identify trends and themes. The way I think about them, and this is Rhonda's thoughts about them, they have technical words, but I think about a theme is what's bubbling up. What are the pockets of things? Like what is most likely? And if I had been thinking about planning ahead, I already have some things that I know are going to come out. In the case of distributing food, I probably am thinking about usefulness. Did people like it? Does it meet their needs? So thinking about themes, trends are things that I think about that could help me describe a phenomena that's going on and also help me predict. When I hear things like, well, we only come on the 4th Wednesday because that's the day you do hand out sweet potatoes, that's a trend. That's greater than the theme about uses. There's something going on when you do this, people are liking that. Or when you do this, that's turning people away. So I think about trends of helping people to predict or anticipate a behavior, where things that are overarching coming out from the data. And we're going to just come off mute. We're not going to go into a breakout group, but what are some themes? And maybe we've covered some of them, but what are some themes, if anyone wants to type in the chat or get off mute, that you may get from this focus group situation that you've done with this group of clients that come to pick up the fresh fruit 2nd and 4th Wednesdays in the evenings? Any themes that you think you may hear that you can prepare for as a researcher on the front end? You could type it in chat or come off mute.
One could be that weekends don't work, or weekdays don't work for a lot of people, weekday evenings.
That's right. Wednesday might be bad. We happen to be we're in Texas, so we're part of the Bible Belt. Wednesday may not work out in people's life. Yep, it just may not be a good day of the week. And I'm going to go to the chat. Favorite foods, let's use items. Exactly. What's working, what's not working. The quality of food. This is fresh, this is not. I love that. Let's use. Anything going on that they waste, less popular items. So you already know, just because of what you're asking, what is going to come out. And you can develop questions to kind of go into the trends that you already anticipate, or the trends or themes you're most interested in knowing about. Because if you really want to know about the day of the week, does it work? We could build a question for that. So I want you to see, if you think about how your reporting is going to be, you want to talk to the leadership about days of the week and types of foods and the foods utilized the most and the foods utilized the least. You set up your questions to help you to go search for those themes and trends that you believe. You can use your overarching questions at the end to get things that you hadn't thought about as a researcher. And so your questions, more than just on the front end having the flair and being vetted, use them to set you up for success to analyze. And that was a missing link that I had not done intentionally. So I see some other ones that I want to acknowledge: the barriers to attendance and the use of the program. Does it work? Is it working? Is it something that works? Or it works in the winter because in the winter you're giving me these things, but in the summer I don't need it because of X. The kids might be gone away for the summer, or I'm utilizing something else, or in the summer there's extra income, so I don't need to come. So I love that. I love that. It can give you more of what's going on there. So communication and communicating your needs is the next thing that I wanted to hone in on. And we probably could have thought about this at the front end. I knew who my report was going to the first time I did those focus groups with the principal, because it was the director that asked for it. But I always think about the audience. And I think about the audience thinking about the level, just their positionality and their utilization of the tool. How a program manager or program lead who's touching whatever you're investigating read your report is very different from leadership who may be thinking about the report more globally. So I always think about who's reading it and who could read it. And you can have more than one audience for some reports, but really thinking about what's going to be valuable to report out, because a decision maker maybe is looking at budget and time utilization of staff and labor, whereas the program lead is looking at all of the things in the weeds that help us make great programs and support. You want to know their preference. Hey, do you want it a soft copy or hard copy? Hey, do you want it in PowerPoint or Word? I know those things sound like, why would you ask that? Sometimes those things matter. I had a boss put it in his desk, make sure it's in Word, and increase the font size you use so that he can see it and not strain his eyes. And that's how he wanted his work. So I have learned, how do you want it? It's like, you can have this report your way. Tell me what's going to help you to read it and consume it. So however I can do that, that's what I'm searching for. I've already talked about the mode, but I've already talked about the specs. Sometimes that particular boss was very exact. And so no report could be longer than 10 pages. And he needed the executive report to be no longer than 2 pages. So even if Rhonda and her teammate had 20 pages of things or lots of, charts that we wanted to use that as the appendix, we still made them. But the hard copy that went in his chair did not have that, because he already gave us the specs. And so again, whatever's going to help your audience consume it, get buy-in and understanding on that, because that helps make the match You've executed, you prepared, you've executed, you've analyzed. Now make sure that it's usable. And going to leave you with some tips for that final report. You want to make sure that you have acknowledged that you have utilized a focus group methodology. I think it's important so people can, you don't have to go in a lot of background, but you didn't use a survey. You didn't interview people. You use focus groups. Make sure that's noted, because that's a different way of getting data. That's bringing people together to discuss something that you've prepared questions that are discussion questions, very different than survey questions. You want to make sure you summarize those themes and trends. Again, you can put that in your executive summary, or if you're doing a PowerPoint, put it at that first slide. Here's what we found. Here's what's going down. Here's some things for you to know as a decision maker or program lead. Also, make sure that your recommendations are actionable and directly from the data. I know this group is superstars here, so I'm not talking to you, but I want you to remember, like, if you said Wednesday doesn't work, you can say that, but also make sure that you have data to show that people have said that Wednesday doesn't work. Even if you know Wednesday doesn't work, always link your recommendations and your findings from the data. And I know it sounds simple, but I've worked alongside people who we have a gut about things, and that's really good. But when you want to substantiate a final report, just make sure you could link it to the data. And so make sure that it's actionable, because if it's Wednesday's a problem, we can change Wednesdays. We heard someone say maybe weekends is better. But if it's something that's not actionable, I am very cautious about putting things in final report that I know people can't do anything about it. Or I want to have something, even if it's something that's unfeasible, another way that a program lead or decision maker could see things. Because we are judged a lot of times in this work about what we're stating, and those recommendations, if people don't think of anything else, they're going to remember what you said could be done, should be done. And so after all of this, that's where people are searching for. What is it that you're saying? Tell me more. Should I use this music program? Should I cancel the food pickups? That's what I want to hear from you as a researcher. So you've done all that work to get them there. Last but not least, they can be an efficient way of gaining information from stakeholders. That is very different than a survey, very different from an interview. And when I say efficient maybe is thinking about not necessarily the labor. They're efficient to get people in a room. That's why if you grew up in the 80s, you remember the mall, they would get people who are in the mall to talk about something, because it's efficient to get people together to get those ideas from them. And they provide that more personal vehicle to obtain feedback. Very different than a survey. Even though I like surveys and use them 90% of the time, the focus group has that extra personal contact and personal touch. And so we've already talked about the scenarios. I want to just give you my references, because again, I started thinking about this and planning these and talking about this probably in 2018 after my 2017 experience. And the way I know Jessica is from Texas Evaluation Network. And so I've presented on focus groups there and shared this with other organizations as well. And so we're going to open it up for questions and answers, but I want to thank you guys for attending. This is my first time being able to talk to some Texas colleagues in this way, and I'm just honored to be here. And I thank you guys for extending my work and my thoughts. So I'm going to open up the floor for questions and answers that we may have, and stop sharing. There is my email address. I'll also try to make sure we get it in the chat. If you have anything, I'll be finding, I think that is Julie from Girl Scouts there in the Houston area. So I'll be reaching out to her on our little connect that we have. But it's a pleasure, and feel free to reach out to me. I'm right here in the Dallas area.
Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause for Rhonda before we get into some questions. So thank you. Yes. All the virtual hands, real hands. So we do have a question. We have two questions coming in. So the first one is, do you collect focus group participant demographics or background data ahead of time?
You can, but I wouldn't unless I'm going to use it. And sometimes it could make use to giving that final report, that initial paragraph, like these were parents, these ages, this ethnicity, this location. So you can. It just depends. I think that sometimes I may ask that at the beginning of my focus group, so I know that there, I have it there. But if I already know the universe that I'm asking about, it probably already lives somewhere else. So I don't know if you always need to collect it in the case that you maybe already know the population you're being asked to talk about.
Excellent point. Yeah. Going back to that, how are you going to use this information? So her second question is, do you utilize focus group consent forms?
No, because I've never talked to kiddos, but I could see a reason maybe you would do it with adults. I've never used focus group reports that I'm going to publish externally. They're an internal tool. And for that reason, I've never thought about doing consent forms, but that's something you could also check with legal, depending on what type of program you're investigating, to just ascertain the risks. And that's a risk management thing. It's not a bad idea though, especially if you think that you and your colleague maybe want to present at a national conference about that project. It's just a risk assessment thing to see if you do need that. But if it's an internal tool and it's above board and it mirrors anything that you could do in a university setting, you don't necessarily need to get that consent. Really good question though. Never thought about that. Someone has a form in Teams. Really good, Sarah.
Yeah. Sarah, do you want to share anything about yours, since I know you tend to work with youth?
Yeah, I've done it both for youth and adults. And I've been real active in the chat because my background's actually a Ph.D. in anthropology. So qualitative research and focus groups is really a lot of my bread and butter. And so I've also really helped out our team start to utilize exactly what you're teaching everybody here. When do you use focus groups? When is it less effective as a tool? And so we've used it really extensively with our most recent Theory of Change update project, where we did a ton of interviews with parents, school partners, and youth. And because I like to be able to have the ability to share quotes externally, I feel safest using a consent form. Just because I think it's a little bit different when you're like consulting versus staff, just because there are different sort of parameters there.
Yes.
But because it's when I'm working with folks that we have an ongoing relationship with, for me, it's just easier to not have to keep track of which quotes I know that we have consent to share externally for, to just be like, everything that's going to collect data like this, we want to make sure we have consent to share externally. And it's just a matter for me of managing, not having to manage which quotes we can share and which quotes we can't.
No, I think it's a good consideration, and it's risk management perspective. And in theory, is someone gonna sue you for a quote that you use, maybe on a website? No, you don't think that, but you don't control that. And unless you're a lawyer, you don't even know the statute of limitations for said quote being utilized without permission. So, it's a safety mechanism and stuff like that. I just always am like, I'm risk averse, so I'll just ask someone in leadership, like, can we, should we, will we? And the form allows you to have that safety in the future, not just at the initial time, but for the future. Really good question. Any other questions? Yes. Do I use any software? Yes. I have right now with my IT leader that I'm following up with today. I am going to get in vivo, and I've not used it since grad school, which has been about 7 years ago. And so that is something that I will be using at my new job, and I love it. And it's been upgraded so much that I can't even tell you all the bells and whistles, but it makes it really easy. Their initial thing is they'll do word counts and word clouds, but then they'll help you identify sub themes. And again, I've never had any other job I had, so I'm excited that I should be getting it because my boss approved it. So I'll be utilizing that to analyze. And the reason I like it is it'll let me use focus group data, but also any qualitative data. I think it's upgraded now to use media as well, videos and graphics, which I probably won't utilize as much. I'm looking at the qualitative data first. What's the name of the program? In vivo. I'll type it in there. It has a high cost associated with it, even at the nonprofit rate. The quote was $14.99. So again, I've never had another job that would pay for it, but we had it in the budget this time. Well, do we have any other questions? Well,
Another
I think
resource sharing in the chat from Sarah about the platform.
Deduced. Yes. And I believe Deduced is it used to be free for a time, like maybe a 30-day or something, but Deduced is really nice. I've used it before. It is really good too for media. It's really good for media. So I do like Deduced as well. There's also something that my boss that was very precise, he wouldn't buy the qualitative. So we found as a team something called Quirks. and it's like a sophisticated word cloud. It does remind you of something in the 90s, and I haven't used it for 4 years, so maybe the software has updated, but it was free and it was easy to use. And it was us trying to get our themes because we had about 800 responses to something, and so we needed something that could help us, and we didn't have it in Vivo, but it was called Quarkos, I believe. Ooh, GPT, yep. That's a whole nother can of worms. Yes, GPT will probably be able to, you could give it to us. It may pull out the themes for us one day and replace our good brains on this call today, just because of how the technology is updated. Nudist, okay, not seen that one before, but thank you for that one, Alicia. I'll look that one up too, because I hadn't heard of that one. Well, I am turning it over to Jessica. Jessica, I see you put the feedback form in there, and I'm turning it over to you and your team.
So much. Please, another big round of applause to Rhonda for sharing her time with us this morning, and then sharing her knowledge and wisdom and expertise on this important area of focus groups. Really appreciate your time today. So I've shared the feedback form. Your feedback is a gift. Please, before you hop off to your next meeting or your next project, next email, please share your feedback with us. We definitely use this to help inform future coffee and qualities. And speaking of future coffee and qualities, we have our next one on August 3rd. That one is a little bit, it's going to feature a few agencies, and they're going to talk about how they've turned their data systems into their friend and not their enemy. So hope you will join us for that one. We'll share the recording, share the PowerPoint after this session on Teams. We'll also circulate it out to everybody who registered today. So thank you all so much for engaging in the conversation, and can't wait to hear how you use focus groups back at your work. So thank you. And thank you again to Rhonda, the wonderful Rhonda.
Thank you.